Hi, this is Tales of Saturn, and this video is going to go over some of the new features I've added to Enceladus Worlds. Enceladus Worlds is the 3D model converter and stage builder tool I have created for Joe Engine and Sega Saturn. In the previous video, I covered the basic features. Since then, I have upgraded the program, and this video will cover all of the new features that have been incorporated. As before, I'm releasing this update with a Joe Engine stage builder demo. The Stage Builder demo is a modified version of the original demo and now takes advantage of the new features in Enceladus Worlds. I'll begin by creating 3 NPC character files. These files will be arrays of meshes which can be loaded in Joe Engine. We'll begin by opening Enceladus, navigating to our 3D model file, and loading in our OBJ mesh file. I want to have animation for this NPC, so that's our stand animation. I'm going to load in a second copy of that, which can be used to snap the animation back to its original position, and then I'm going to include our 2 keyframes. As in the previous video, I can use M to cycle through my meshes. Second mesh is the same stand animation. Third is step, and fourth is also step, and then back to our original mesh. Let's make some changes. First off, as with the previous video, we can use R to rotate textures. I can also see that the mustache and face are not oriented correctly. I use R to rotate so that the eyebrow is at the top. I can see that this one is not facing the right direction though. It needs to be mirrored, and we can flip it with the F button. Now it looks correct. Same with the mustache. Flip it round and flip. Now that looks correct. You can also, if you need to, use the I button to invert the plane of your textures. So this will be inverting the direction for backface culling. It multiplies all of the normal vector components by -1 and flips the direction. So as you can see, we press I and it's correct. We can flip it back round and we can change the direction from which a polygon is visible or not visible. Obviously we don't need to do that in this case because everything is correct, but that is an available feature if you need it. I'll just change the texture on this with the T button. As you can see, that is actually the shirt texture, but I think it works quite well for the cleaver. If I now press the M button and cycle through the meshes, you'll see that's the main mesh. The textures obviously have not been modified on the second one, and here's our stepping animations. I don't actually need to change the textures on the next mesh because I'm only going to use those meshes to animate this mesh. The next new feature is the toggle button for backface culling. At the moment, we're on dual plane. This means backface culling is turned off. If I click it, backface culling is turned on. You can't really see it on this mesh because it's a solid object, so there's no reason for backface culling to be turned off. If you zoom in close enough, you'll be able to see that the polygons are not visible from the other side. I'll now export my mesh. Now that I've exported my mesh, I'll close Enceladus, go to my output folder. Here's my converted textures, and at the top we have our mesh file. I'm going to rename this NPC1. The reason I'm renaming it NPC1 is because I've set the demo to load a file called NPC1 from the level 1 and level 2 directories in the root directory of the CD. I'll go back to my demo. I'll go to the file list, level 1, paste our files in, and we're going to load it on level 2 as well. Obviously, you can load in different NPCs for different levels, but for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to use the same 3 NPCs. Let's make 2 more NPCs. First off, we'll tidy up our files. Reopen Enceladus. Go to our 3D models. Let's take our main character. As before, we will load in 2 copies of the stand position and our keyframes. Using M, we can cycle through them. And no modifications are required on this mesh. Once again, I will click the back face culling mode on, single plane. Quick note, you don't need to turn on back face culling on the other keyframes for animation purposes. If you're not actually going to display these meshes separately, which I'm not going to, you only need back face culling turned on this mesh because this is the only one we're actually going to draw. The rest of the meshes are just arrays of points which we will use for animation and interpolation. Let's export. Again, we will close Enceladus, go to our output file. We're going to rename this one NPC2. Copy our files and paste them into our level 1 and level 2 directories. Now we can clean up the output folder. And reopen Enceladus. Let's get one more NPC. Do this one here. Rotate the texture, turn on back face culling, and export. I've set the demo to use arrays of meshes, so even though there's only one mesh here, I am going to export an array. The functions are in the files to load single meshes as well, but there's really no harm other than an extra integer in memory to load it as an array as well. Let's close Enceladus, go to our output, and this one's going to be NPC3. Copy our files and paste it into level 1 and level 2. I do have a repeating texture name in here, so on one I overwrote and on the other one I've skipped. I suspect it's probably the hair texture. Now we can start making one of our stages. Let's tidy up our files, go back to Enceladus, open it up, and find some 3D models for level 1. Let's have a building of some kind. I'll add some natural features. And some furniture. Let's now go through our meshes and decide if we want backface culling on or off. On this one, we obviously want it turned on. We'll rotate the menu quickly. And the balcony. I think I want backface culling turned on this one. However, that does mean that the awning is not going to be visible from underneath. However, the way the game is played, I think this is the correct look. On this tree, we obviously want it turned off because, as you can see, it's a cardboard cutout type of design. So if we turn on backface culling, it's not going to be appearing correctly from different angles. Let's flip some of these textures to make it look more natural. I think this is a background feature, so it should probably be double-sided, as the camera may view it from the other side. And any solid objects should have backface culling turned on. Right, let's export. That's finished exporting. Let's start making our stage. Here we are in stage builder mode, and the first new feature you might see is that we have 3 layers selectable up here. This will export arrays of OBJs, which can be used to place 3D objects around a stage. The reason I've added 3 layers is so that I can have different distances for depth culling on different objects. I'll use layer 1 for objects I want to be visible from a long distance, like the house and this tree. On the house, the borders made a lot of sense. The boundary is set by the size of the object and its furthest vertices. However, for the tree, this is too large because of the branches at the top protruding further than at the base. I can use this set collision button to adjust the collision box accordingly. Then I can use the slider to adjust the size. I want collision to be roughly in line with these roots so that the carrot can walk right up next to the tree. Let's turn off set collision and place some medium draw distance objects. Let's do the tree wall here. These are smaller objects. I still want them drawn at some distance, but they can clip out closer than the house and the tree. The boulder looks like a medium draw distance object as well. Let's put it somewhere near the tree. And these look like objects that should only be drawn at a relatively close distance to the camera. Maybe a couple of tables outside the cafe. This one too is a smaller object that I'm happy to clip out at a considerably closer distance to the camera than the other objects. The next new feature is this Add Sprite button. Let's turn off Add Object mode, add a sprite, and I already have the texture from the top of these tree walls selected. I can use M to cycle through my textures, but this is the one I want. You might notice that it's upside down. That's because the coordinate system has been configured with GeoEngine in mind, which means that negative values of y are considered up. That does mean in this program the texture is looking upside down, but when you load it on GeoEngine, it will be the correct way up. As with the hitboxes, when you have set collision turned on, you can scale these sprites, so you can decide how big you want them to be. Let's have a little bit of variation. Put a very large one in the middle. And then a few smaller ones around the edges. Let's change it up to make it look more natural. That looks good to me. Lastly, let's add our NPCs. Turn off Add Sprite mode. You can see I've got 3 selectable NPCs down here. Once again, this is exporting OBJs. This time it's single OBJs. Note that I'm not talking about 3D mesh OBJ files, but my struct type in the demo. I click Add NPC. I can use the left and right button to change the direction that it's facing. And I can move it around as normal. Let's have our NPC one here. That will be the chef. I can add multiple positions if, for example, I want to mark out a path for the NPC to traverse. I won't actually bother adding any animation for this demonstration, but it's something you can do. Let's add a second NPC. Note that it's appeared as a different color so you can see which is which. And then a final NPC can be standing over by the oven. Now we're ready to export our level. I'll go ahead and close Enceladus, open our output file, get all of our files in here. These are named the way they need to be for the demo. Copy that, go back to our stage builder, to the root directory, and this will be our level 1. Right, let's make another level. Back to Enceladus, go to our 3D models. I've set up the demo to use sprites in both, so we will go ahead and load the tree again, along with the tree wall. so that we can have our texture. And then we'll grab some other 3D models. Let's have our barrel and crate. And let's have a different building. That one should do. Once again, we want this one to be dual plane. This one should have backface culling turned on, as should this. This one here needs the sign rotated. These textures need rotating as well. Now on this one, if I do turn on backface culling, we've got the same problem with the awning, but we also have this problem with the sign at the top. For that reason, I think we will turn it off on this one. Likewise for the tree, and the tree wall is as before. Let's export our meshes. Before I do that, I'll make sure I've tidied up. Now we have our level 2 meshes. Let's build a stage. We'll start with our tree, set collision and adjust the bounding box. I haven't actually incorporated any collision detection in the demo, but the bounding box gives you the features that you need so that you can implement that. Let's have a tree wall. On this level, only the tree will be a long distance object. Do that. Barrel looks like a short draw distance object. Same with the crate. And this one looks like it should be a medium distance object. Let's add sprites. Obviously you can create cubes with different textures on them, or even single polygons in your meshes as a way of storing extra sprites. Or you can just reuse textures the way I am. There we go. And let's add our NPCs. One here, one here, and one here. Now we'll export our level. Now we have level 2, we can close this. Get all our files from the output, copy, and go to level 2 and paste. We're now ready to compile and run the game. You may wish to make changes to a level you've already exported. You can still do that as before. If you pick the level you want to change, you can load in your meshes by dragging them in, just like before. And this time, if you go to Stage Builder, just be conscious of what layer you are loading your layers into. So we have our layer files here, and it won't matter what the layer is called. What matters is what you have selected. So if you drag and drop any binary file, it will load in the bytes according to the parser. So if we do that as layer 1, and if you loaded that as layer 3, that's what's going in as layer 3. And then if you load this as layer 2, that's what's going in as layer 2. You can only load one file per layer. And you can obviously use this if you want to have more than 3 NPCs. So if you wanted some extra NPCs, just add some NPCs wherever you want. Maybe you got someone sitting on a chair. Obviously I haven't got models for this, but that's something you can do. Or whatever else you might want to do. I haven't put in a feature to load in NPCs because it's relatively straightforward to put down positions. And if you make a mistake, you can always start again and reload your level. Likewise, you can also load in your sprites. These aren't actually the textures, but rather the positions for the sprites. There you go. And like with the layers, you don't need anything selected to load it in, but you can only load in one file. So once you've loaded it in, you can't load in any additional files. You can, of course, also select objects and move them around just like before. With the sprites, once they've been loaded back in, they won't have a hitbox you can select to move them around. However, before you've exported the level, when you've placed a sprite, you will be able to select that again with an existing hitbox and then move it around. Sprites do not get exported with any size, which is why there is no hitbox once you have exported them. Let's compile and run our 2 levels. Double click here to compile. We'll wait for that to finish. That's done. And now run it with the emulator of your choice. Here we are. As you can see, backface culling is on here. Seem to have a bit of a problem with the chef there. I've used white as the transparent color, which is obviously having problems. And obviously, the way I've done this demo, it's drawing all of the meshes in the array, all of the positions in the array rather, instead of just drawing the main position and then using the rest as a pathway for the NPC to travel along. So you can see we're kind of clipping between the two. I'll obviously need to fix that. Main thing to fix there is the texture. I'll just have to change those transparent white ones to a slightly more grey looking color. But otherwise, this is working quite well. We have our tree walls there, similar issues with the alpha texture there. Some of those whites are not quite white enough to become transparent. This NPC's here, maybe a little bit close to the oven, but otherwise working fine. And over there we have our last NPC hidden behind the rock over here. As I turn around, I'll be able to see that objects set to layer 3 disappear at a much closer distance. The oven's gone. See the table and chairs disappearing. And then the tree will start disappearing. And then the house and the tree will remain regardless of the distance, as will the NPCs. Obviously, you can modify the code as you please, set the draw distances however works for you, but this gives you an idea of how it works. As you can see as well, we have the tree with 2D sprites forming the leaves in the tree. And this gives you a relatively nice look regardless of what angle you look at it at. In this demo, if you press A, you'll load the next level. Here we are. Once again, we have a tree and we have our tree walls. You see they disappear at a certain distance, get closer and they pop back in. And when I get close enough, our barrel and crate models will appear. Here's our sweet shop. That looks fine. Got our barrels, got our NPC. Remember how we had a duplicate texture name? On this level, we kept the chef's hair texture, so it's black. On the previous one, it was brown. Press A again, and we will load back to level 1. And if we look at the chef, we will see that the hair is brown, which matches what the female NPC's hair color was. That's about it for this demonstration. I hope this was useful. If you've got any questions, please feel free to send me a message in the comments on this video, or find my download on Sega Extreme, comment there, or indeed go on the Sega Extreme Discord and ask any questions there.